Okay, there we go.
Okay. So let's call to order the nominating committee of the Oak Park Public Library Board of Trustees. You said we need a roll call, David?
Take a roll call. Rita is here to take the minutes.
Okay. Ted Foss,
Here.
Virginia Bloomshire,
Here.
and Colleen Burns is present. Okay. Any public comments that you received, David?
I have received none, and I don't see any members of the community that are a part of the meeting tonight.
Okay. And that means we can move on to coming up with a slate of candidates. How do you guys want to do this? I reached out to Matt, who said he would be willing to continue to serve. I reached out to Sarah, and she was willing to continue to serve. I didn't know we had a vice president and a finance officer, but who currently fills that role?
Ted is the vice president, and I'm kind of like the vice president of the United States. I don't do anything unless Matt gets knocked off.
Who is our finance officer?
That was Christian.
It was Christian. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we definitely need to talk about that. Okay, so where do you guys want to start?
Can we start with, I mean, I'd like to start from the bottom up if we can. I know that's a little bit counterintuitive.
No, I'm happy with that.
But I'd like to, and maybe David can chime in on this, exactly what are the duties of the finance officer? Because I know unless we were talking about budgeting and things, we don't get too into the weeds on a lot of the finance minutia.
Right. Yeah, that was, and with Christian for the few years that he was the finance officer, that's what it basically boiled down to. Particularly at budget time, he would get together. He would have a personal meeting with me and usually with Jeremy. Before Jeremy, it was Jim, to talk about some priorities that he had to make sure that he understood the process that we were going to be following. Early on in his tenure, he would ask more questions as he was learning about how our levy process worked and what the relationship was between the library and the village when it came to all of those things. So it was really, mostly during the summer months that we would have a few meetings with him. Other than that, if he had other questions during the year about, for instance, the audit and how that process was going, or if he had particular questions about expenditures, we would meet with him. But it was very, very few meetings each year. And it was mostly determined by Christian when he wanted to talk or had questions about things. And that's really it. There he is the finance officer is also a signatory on our bank accounts. He rarely had to actually fulfill that responsibility because I'm also a signatory. Matt Fruth is a signatory, and if we ever needed a signature of a board member, it was often Matt that would do it. But our finance officer is typically a signatory on our bank accounts too.
Okay.
And that's about it.
I think we might want to consider, is there anything else we want? And this kind of goes for all four positions. Are there any other things that we want them to do? Like, do we want our finance officer to definitely go to like iGov? Like, do we want to have that perspective definitely sitting at that table? Or do we definitely want the, vice president to be doing something with friends and sort of that be their vice presidential initiative or something? Like, are there other points, like other things that we as a board do that we want to attach to some of these positions so that we make sure that we have at least one person going? Because I know with Marianne leaving and Christian leaving, that means we have a couple of those slots where we might want somebody who has at least a little bit more experience. And we may want to have somebody with, the financial perspective sitting down with the other boards, so that when we're talking money, they have the best idea of what our financial situation looks like. It might not be necessary, but.
Well, David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the officer duties are laid out in the board bylaws. The finance officer is really just sort of to keep an extra eagle eye on staff to make sure we're, dotting our i's and crossing our t's. And usually what happens with the board liaisons to the different groups is the president asks somebody to serve on those and appoint somebody. So that might be something that you want to discuss as a board after you get your officers in place as to, how those appointments are made.
Thank you, Rita.
That's
Yes,
just
my
my
told for what?
suggestion.
Yeah, and that right, and Rita's absolutely right. The board bylaws do establish the roles and responsibilities of the offices. Again, that not to say that those couldn't change, and that this committee couldn't recommend to the board, the full board, additional things that we thought that perhaps the officers might want to be responsible for. But yes, the bylaws do stipulate basically what the few responsibilities are.
Okay.
Two components about the finance officer. One, of course, we're all asked to certify that we have not seen any fraud. So that's kind of a further check on the library's finances. And second, I believe that we are all covered by a directors and officers insurance policy, which protects the library as an institution. Is that correct, David?
Both of those things are correct. Yes, there's a directors and officers errors and omissions coverage through our liability insurance, and that covers all of the activities of the trustees in the performance of your duties. And yes, as all of you know, because you receive them, you all get letters from the auditor once a year to return to certify that you are not aware of any fraud or have witnessed any such.
Okay.
So I haven't had anybody step forward to say that they would like to serve as finance officers. So I think we should discuss who might be a good fit for that role.
I won't step forward and say that I would love to, but I would be open to having that opportunity and taking a look at the finances more closely. I know that there would be a steep learning curve, but if you haven't had anyone else step up and say they were interested, I will throw my hat in the ring.
Well, if I had a bell, I would ring it. That's fantastic to hear. I think you would be very well suited to that role. So I'm delighted to hear that you are interested in filling it. Is there any other discussion about slating Virginia for the finance officer? Okay, moving on to secretary. I reached out to Sarah Glavin this morning. She offered to continue on in that role unless somebody was itching to tackle it. So I don't know if any of the others on the call have had anybody reach out to them about that position in particular, but otherwise I'm happy to continue to have Sarah fill that responsibility.
I'm fine with that.
Fantastic. How do you feel about being vice president, Ted?
Well, I have told David that it is my intention at this point not to run again when my term is up in 2 years.
Okay.
And I believe that we put a new slate in every year or every other year, David?
Every other?
Typically it is whenever there is an election. So the board typically re-elects officers every 2 years. So if you were re-elected now as vice president, Ted, basically you would just serve until the election. And if you decided you weren't going to run again, then there would be another election at that time.
Right. And I did think that when we were putting a slate together after the last election, that it was important that people who are board officers have already had some service on the board. I think that really does help rather than just taking a newbie and putting that person in.
Right, well, and except for Matarima will be the only, at least until you fill your vacancy, Matarima will be the only new trustee.
Correct. Although I still consider myself a new trustee. So is that affirmative, Ted? Are you willing to continue to serve
Yes,
until the
yes, I
election?
am, particularly because the only time I panic is when I find out that Matt can't run a meeting. Then I have to go back to Robert's Rules of Order and reread the document.
I'll send you a copy.
But
Okay,
Actually, David has sent us all copies.
so Ted's got this vice president slot, so that leaves the chair with Matt. Are we comfortable slating Matt for another term as president?
I am. I think I'm comfortable with slating him for another 2 years. I would, however, maybe like some of us to get a little bit more acquainted with Robert's Rules of Order and how to run a meeting. I know he's been president for a very long time. And Ted, if you're not planning to run again in 2 years, then the rest of us need to dust off some of our parliamentary skills and learn a little bit more about what it is that Matt takes on behind the scenes. I know you said that, David, that everything is outlined in the bylaws, but I have a feeling that Matt takes on a little bit more than what's in the bylaws.
Oh, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So I think I'd like for us all to know a little bit more of what he has to do, because he's holding a lot right now. And as the board, maybe we should take a little bit of that pressure off of him and learn a little bit more of what he's doing behind the scenes. I know especially recently fielding all of those emails, which I know he's done like 2 or 3 times when we've been inundated with emails. Being the contact for public comments, things like that. Maybe understanding a little bit more how he's handling those and divvying those up so that we are prepared for having somebody step in if we can't all talk Ted into staying, or if Matt for some reason in the future does not want to be the president anymore. It would be big shoes to fill, and slightly terrifying shoes to fill, frankly, because he has been so integral to the board. So I'm more than happy for him to stay president, but I think we need to know a little bit more of the extra things that he's taken on, so that we can help him out with that and plan better for the future.
Did you want me, or did you want to ask him to be prepared to talk a little bit more about that at this month's board meeting? Is that how you'd like to do that, or?
I don't know that it has to be that formal. I mean, we can float the idea, but I don't want to put him on the spot and,
Oh yeah, no, I would talk to him, ahead of time, if that's what you wanted, but.
Yeah, I mean, I know running the meeting is definitely at the top of
Sure.
what he does, but I have a feeling there are a lot of meetings that he takes, a lot of correspondence that he does. You said he's, sometimes signing off on some of the finances.
Yep.
And we don't necessarily see that until after it's done or after he said he's going to take care of it. So I'd like to know a little bit more of what it is that he has to do, and see if we feel like we want to reallocate that, especially, as we do have some new members coming in and we start looking at who's going to go with, which other governmental, committees or whatever. And just make sure that we don't have so much piled on Matt that, should he have a life and have to do something,
Sure.
we're all a little stuck in the mud.
Sure. Well, again, if there's something you want me to do to, sort of help facilitate that, just let me know.
Okay.
I think that's fair. There's kind of 3 generations now of trustees, right? So you and I in the middle, and then the new trustees coming behind us. Although I still feel like I'm new.
Yeah.
How it has been 2 years, I can't even comprehend that. So anyways, okay, so that's noted. I think that we have a slate. We don't have to vote, correct, David?
No, you don't vote at all. You just, now that you've come to consensus, then you, Colleen, would formally present the slate to the board at their meeting, and then Matt would lead the election.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. Okay, so do we just adjourn then?
Yep, you are all done unless there's anything else about this you want to talk about, then you can adjourn the meeting.
All right, cool. Meeting adjourned. Rita, many thanks again to you as always for keeping us on the straight and narrow, and to David for being with us at 6 p.m. on a Monday evening. I didn't stop for like 15 minutes today, so I'm grateful to be in a moment of peaceful reflection with all of you. And when is our next meeting? Remind me.
Our meeting this month is on Tuesday,
May 5th, I think.
May 25th. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's in
That's
2 weeks and 1 day.
Okay. Well, we'll see each other all in that virtual space then.
All right. Thanks, Colleen.
All right. Have a
Yeah,
great evening,
thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.